The rain hadn't let up for hours. It fell in cold, relentless sheets, drumming on the cracked sidewalks of Broadmoor Avenue, turning the street into a slick, glistening river. Streetlights flickered weakly, casting dim halos of light over boarded-up storefronts and rusted mailboxes. At this hour, past 11 p.m., most places had long since closed. Except for one. The Broadmoor Diner stood stubbornly at the corner of the block, its faded neon sign buzzing softly, painting streaks of red and blue across the wet pavement. Inside, a woman wiped down the counter with slow, tired movements. She was tall, her cocoa-brown skin glistening slightly from the humidity and the heat of the kitchen. Her name was Alana Brooks, and she had worked here for the better part of 8 years. She wasn't supposed to be here anymore. Her shift had ended 2 hours ago, but she had covered for a coworker who had to rush home to a sick child. Alana had done double shifts more times than she could count. Rent didn't wait. Utilities didn't wait. And her little brother, who still needed braces, certainly didn't wait. But even now, bone-weary, her feet aching in shoes that should have been replaced last year, she never let exhaustion dull her kindness. That's why, when she glanced up and noticed a small figure outside, huddled beneath the diner's flickering sign, she didn't think twice. A boy, thin, frail, sitting in a battered wheelchair. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, soaked by the downpour. His coat was too thin for a night this cold, and his trembling hands clutched a ragged blanket like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Alana dropped the rag on the counter and headed for the door, pushing it open into the storm. The wind sliced through her uniform, stealing her breath for a second, but she crouched down in front of him anyway. "Hey, baby," she said gently, her voice low and soothing. "What are you doing out here all by yourself?" The boy flinched at first, then slowly turned his head toward her. His eyes, startlingly green, wide and frightened, searched her face. "I'm waiting for my dad," he mumbled, his words nearly drowned by the rain. Alana's heart clenched. She glanced up and down the street. It was deserted, save for the faded glow of a pawn shop across the way. "Where is he?" she asked, her tone carefully calm, though concern gnawed at her. The boy shrugged, pulling the blanket tighter around himself. "He said he'd be back. Just a minute." His voice cracked on the last word. Alana sighed quietly. She'd seen too many nights like this. Too many kids left waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. She held out her hand. "Well, you can't stay out here," she said with a warm smile. "Not in this mess. Come inside with me, okay? It's warm, and I've got something special for you." For a moment, he hesitated. Then, slowly he nodded. She carefully took hold of his wheelchair and pushed him through the door. Inside, the warmth embraced them both. The smell of grilled onions, bacon, and old coffee filled the air. Alana guided him to a booth near the radiator, grabbed a clean towel from behind the counter, and gently draped it over his shoulders. "I'm Alana," she told him as she crouched down to meet his gaze. "What's your name, sweetheart?" He blinked at her, the green in his eyes brightening just a little. "Mason," he whispered. "That's a strong name," she said, smiling. "You hungry, Mason?" He gave the faintest nod. "Thought so." She stood up and headed to the kitchen. In less than 5 minutes, she returned with a hot grilled cheese sandwich, golden and crisp, and a steaming bowl of tomato soup. She set it down in front of him with a napkin tucked under his chin. "This one's on me," she said. Mason stared at the food as if he couldn't quite believe it was real. Then he took a bite. The cheese stretched in gooey strings, and his expression softened into something close to awe. "This is the best thing I've ever had," he murmured. Alana chuckled softly, watching him eat like he hadn't in days. "Good food makes everything better," she said. What she didn't know was that someone was watching. Across the street, a black luxury sedan sat parked beneath the pawn shop sign. Its windows were dark, but behind them sat a man with sharp gray eyes and an expression carved from stone. Elliot Kane was the boy's father, and everything he was seeing, this act of simple kindness, unprompted, undeserved, was changing something inside him. He wasn't sure he liked it. Elliot Kane was 48 years old. CEO of Kane Systems, a tech empire worth billions. In his world, everything had a price. Everything was a transaction. Yet here was this woman, this waitress in a frayed apron, giving his son warmth and comfort, asking for nothing in return. He reached for his phone. "Nina," he said when his assistant picked up, "I need you at the Broadmoor Diner. 20 minutes. No suits. No fees. Blend in." He paused. "Find out everything you can about the woman who just fed my son." Then he hung up. Inside the diner, Mason laughed for the first time that night. His shoulders relaxed. His color came back. Alana watched him, wiping a bit of soup from his chin with a napkin. "Messy eater, huh?" she teased gently. She didn't notice the door open right away. Cold air rushed in, followed by a woman in jeans, a gray hoodie, and sneakers that looked just a little too clean for this neighborhood. Her blonde hair was tucked under a baseball cap. She moved with confidence, too much of it. Alana stiffened immediately. The woman's gaze landed on Mason, and her features softened. "Hey, champ," she said lightly. "Time to go." Mason frowned. "But I didn't finish my milk." "You can take it with you," the woman said smoothly. "Your ride's waiting." Alana narrowed her eyes. She crossed her arms over her chest. "You know him?" she asked. The woman didn't miss a beat. "I'm his aunt." Alana turned to Mason. "That true, baby?" Mason hesitated, just a heartbeat too long. It was enough. Alana crouched beside him again, keeping her voice soft. "You good, Mason? You want to go with her?" He bit his lip, staring at his hands. "She's here for my dad," he whispered. "I guess I have to." Alana's stomach twisted, but she forced a smile. "Okay," she said gently. She grabbed a chocolate chip cookie from the counter, wrapped it in wax paper, and handed it to him. "For the road." Mason smiled. "Thanks, Alana. You're the best." As the woman wheeled Mason to the door, she glanced back. Just once. No words. But the look said everything. A warning. Across the street, Elliot Kane's car door opened as they approached. He stepped out into the rain, his tailored coat pristine despite the weather. "She's sharp," Nina said as she slid into the car. "Didn't buy the aunt thing." Elliot's expression didn't change. "But she let him go." "She didn't have a choice," Nina replied. "You know how it is. Black woman makes a scene. She's the one in trouble." Elliot said nothing, but his jaw tightened. "She's not like the others," Nina said after a moment. "I know," Elliot replied. "That's why she's dangerous." He climbed back into the car and shut the door. Alana made it home, soaked to the bone. Her apartment on East Monroe was barely more than a shoebox, with thin walls and a heater that only worked when it felt like it. She dropped her keys on the counter and leaned against the door, rubbing her hands over her face. She'd promised herself she wouldn't get involved. Not ever again. But something about Mason gnawed at her. Then came the knock. Alana froze. No one came by this late. She looked through the peephole and felt her stomach drop. Elliot Kane stood there. When she finally opened the door, barely an inch, his presence filled the hallway like he owned it. "You know my son," he said. Alana didn't answer. She didn't have to. "I don't believe in charity," Elliot said, "but I believe in paying debts." He placed an envelope on her table without waiting for permission. It was thick, heavy, expensive. "A job," he said. "Kane Systems. 6 figures." Alana laughed. A sharp, disbelieving sound. "You think I want a handout from a billionaire who thinks writing a check makes us even?" Elliot didn't blink. "I think you don't want charity. That's why I'm not offering it." She stared at him. And finally, after a long, long silence, she picked up the envelope. "I'll think about it." Within weeks, Alana was working at Kane Systems. She found herself in glass conference rooms, facing down executives who underestimated her. But it didn't stay that way for long. Alana proved herself again and again, handling negotiations, navigating corporate warfare. And when someone tried to set her up, leaking classified reports and trying to pin it on her, she fought back. She found the real culprit and exposed him in front of the board. Elliot Kane didn't smile often, but when Alana saved his company from scandal, he did. "You did good, Brooks," he said. "Damn right I did." Years later, Alana Brooks sat in an office with her name on the door, Vice President of Corporate Strategy. She had launched programs for ethical labor, mentorships, scholarships, and at the opening of the Brooks Kane Community Center, Mason, now a college freshman, stood proudly by her side. "See," he said, "told you I'd make it." "You sure did, baby," Alana said with a grin. Because kindness is always the best investment. Back into Next Pointing Right. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Join us for more stories that inspire, touch hearts, and remind us that every act of kindness can change a life.